easy stuff first. Unemployment. So often you talk about in your chart the unemployment number as being a bit of a benchmark indicator to the RBA as to whether they should put rates up or down or leave them where they are. Where's unemployment at the moment?
Since we last chatted, we had the December monthly unemployment number. It went from 3.9 to 4.0%. And that is still within, and I like to make this point, that it's still within 0.5% of being at a 50-year low. About 18 months ago, when we got to 3.5%, that was the lowest since 1974, heaven forbid.
Wow.
Now, it's gone up as the economy slowed down, and a lot of people, including Treasury, including the RBA, and dare I say all of the bank economist teams that I look at, were expecting that unemployment rate to get to 4.5, 4.7, 4.8. It's still at 4.
Even the RBA modelled it in.
Even the RBA were 4.5, yep, or thereabouts. Now, the fact that we're at 4% is a good news story. You know, just take it away from interest rates for 1 second. You know, you and I have had this conversation for years and years and years. I like an economy where everybody has a job. You know, that's great. You know, everybody's got a purpose. They're earning money. It's Goldilocks, yes, and they're working. They're earning money. It's good for society. It's good for the economy. It's good for everybody to have very low unemployment. It's bad to have high unemployment. You know.
That is for sure.
That's a good story. That's a good story. When it comes to interest rates, for those people who've got chunky debt or, you know, sort of holding their breath for rate cuts during the course of this year, they're sort of saying, well, and the RBA is saying the same sort of thing from their statements of late last year. When the unemployment rate, and I'll use too low in inverted commas, is too low, what it means is that wage pressures are probably high because there's a shortage of labour.
When you say too low, in other words, everybody's employed effectively.
Yep. And I want to hire someone. I can't find anybody, so I've got to put wages up.
Yep.
As a business person, when I put wages up, how do I maintain my profit? I put up my prices.
Yep.
What's putting up my prices? That's inflation.
Yep.
And that's what the RBA is fighting against.
Yep.
So it's not the RBA being mean, you know, oh, got to get unemployment up. You know, they're not being, you know, tough, you know, nasty people. They're using it as part of their model for forecasting where inflation is going to be. And this is where that 4% unemployment rate is certainly debatable at the moment, because it's actually happened when wage growth is still pretty decent, 3.5%. But what was it? 6 months before that, it was 4.3%. So wages growth has actually come off the boil with an unemployment rate of 4%. And as we're probably going to discuss in a minute, the inflation rates come down quite nicely, including the trimmed mean in the December quarter. And so the RBA is sort of weighing up all these sort of things and thinking, well, hang on, you know, remember the narrow path that the previous governor, Phil Lowe, talked about? The narrow path, just to tell everyone, was he wanted to get the economy along the path to get inflation back on target without causing mass unemployment. You know what? They might be damn close to achieving that.
And what's interesting about that, or what's sort of let's call it so shocking about that outcome potentially happening, is, was generally speaking, if inflation's high and the interest rates go up, unemployment usually follows, because business have to put people off, and as a result of that, people lose jobs, and then inflation comes back down.
Because wages come down.
And people have less money to spend, and people are a bit more nervous about their life, and people keep talking about the unemployment number, and everyone starts to sort of bunker down a little bit and spend less money. And, you know, that's how they control the economy. That's how they control our behaviour. It's interesting in just conceptual or in a policy sense. It in the past, it's nearly been, as opposed to this time, it's nearly been a trade-off by saying inflation is a bigger bogeyman than unemployment. We would rather have inflation under control because inflation affects everyone. And
100% of the population.
100% of the population. It has a concentrated effect on a very large percentage of the population who are on less wages than, say, the rest of the economy. But unemployment only affects a small percentage of the population. So it's a bit of a trade-off.
Yes.
But what they've done here, what you said, is this is very important. They have, looks like they may have managed to keep unemployment pretty steady. In other words, people are mostly employed in this country. And at the same time, it looks like inflation is going in the right direction.
And that's been the remarkable thing. Now, there's still a little bit of time to go before we can put our hand on our heart and say, yeah, they've done it. But the way that unemployment number over the last few months of 2024 has panned out is giving more credence to what the RBA was doing. And so the fact that we've actually had that occurring with the wage growth decelerating and, as I said, with inflation coming down, sure, the economy's weak. We know that that's been the thing that is sort of, again, the other surprise, because, 0.8 annual GDP, normally you'd expect firms to be saying, oh, gee, I don't need to hire any staff because my business is so poor. But we've seen these hiring numbers
But
still
we know
being
where
strong.
they're hiring, though.
Well, it's in the
public sector,
government sector, sort of NDIS and education and healthcare. So
that's an important
but
point.
that's still jobs being created.
I was going to say, it doesn't really matter.
So in a funny way, it's a little bit like, would you prefer a business to be government run or private sector run? Now, generally, there's one or two exceptions always to this rule. Generally, private firms are better and more efficient at running a big business. Generally, there's one or two exceptions, of course. But the government does things that the private sector do because they're not profitable for the private sector to do them. The classic one is defence. We're not going to have a private sector army. So we need the government to spend tens of billions of dollars per annum on defence, on border force to protect our borders. And I think most people agree, fair enough. We want to be having our defence forces in a good position because we don't want, we don't want to be invaded or anything like that. So that's one business, if you like, we call it a business, that the government does better than the private sector. So healthcare is a debatable one. Aged care and all the NDIS and all these other things, they're debatable in education, and there are components of the private sector within that. But where that extra spending has been in the public sector that's fed into public sector jobs has been in areas that are for people in aged care. So people who sort of can't afford to fork out lots of money for good quality private sector aged care or healthcare or private schools. They go to a public school and, I want my kids and grandkids and to be educated. Yeah, it's part of a good society. So we do need to, so it's this debate about, is the public sector always bad? No, not always. Is the private sector always good? No, not always. There's a balance. And I think we're just traversing that right now. And I think we've still got a bit of a hangover from the COVID issue where the government sector, good old Josh Frydenberg, copped a bit of flack. I think a little unfairly, because what he did to, negotiate that health pandemic in terms of the economics, there were a couple of things that might have been a bit extravagant and spent a bit too much money. But at the end of the day, we got through that with the public, voters, if you like, saying, well, the government actually did an okay job. And there is a role for government. It's not just private sector good, public sector bad. There's a bit of a role for the government sector. And that's where we sort of are with the employment side right now.
So the unemployment number, in other words, the number of people as a percentage of the total population of people employable is pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Our long-term average is more like 5%, but
so at 4, which is nice.
Pretty good. And so, in other words, the employment market hasn't tanked. That'll keep the unions happy. It'll keep generally people happy who are losing their jobs. And we know that a lot of jobs have been made available in the public sector, but we're not here to pull that apart at the moment. No. That's more a political policy issue. We'll leave that between Dutton and Albanese to argue that one. Yeah.